Yo, what's up, guys? Paulie Malignaggi, Tommy Reno, and this is Tommy and Paulie's Big Fight Forecast. Another episode. We hope you've been enjoying the picks, the discussions, and really the overall gambling landscape of boxing that we love to discuss here on Tommy and Paulie's Big Fight Forecast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and check us out every week as we do our episodes discussing everything gambling on the sport of boxing. Remember that everything discussed on Tommy and Paulie's Big Fight Forecast is not gambling or investment advice. It is strictly for entertainment purposes. Tommy, what's going on, buddy?
Not much, buddy. There's not a lot going on this weekend at all.
Well, you know what it is? It's a little bit of the calm before the storm, I think. We're
Yeah,
getting closer to a big week on Canelo fight week, where there's not just the big Canelo fight, but there's also the Inoue fight in Japan that week. So, that's going to be a huge week. But as we get closer, things will start to pick up a little bit, man. So,
yeah. Next week there's I think 3 cards, and then obviously the following week.
there was a lot of there was a lot to gamble on last week. It wasn't huge cards, but there was a lot of boxing to gamble on last week, and we did some discussions on that. And what do we got this week? We got Albert Bell, not the baseball player.
I wish.
Not the baseball player.
I would pay money to see Albert Bell fight. My God.
Yeah. No. I don't know. Nobody wanted to take him on. He was a big guy.
He's a head case.
Head case.
Yeah, dude. Somebody knocked on the kids knocked on his door on Halloween. He chased him out with a baseball bat or something.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds like Albert Bell.
Yeah.
The baseball
So
player.
Albert Bell, this one, he's 27-0, 19 knockouts. I believe these are featherweights, 126. He's fighting Keith Hunter. Hunter is 16-2 with 10 knockouts. I'm predicting a very, very fun fight. Stylistically, it's going to be a very good clash. Both guys have slickness to them. Both guys can counterpunch. Both guys are long, rangy guys. These guys are a lower weight class, but they're both 6 foot. They're tall and long. They're both very skilled.
6 foot featherweights, both of them.
Yeah. Let me just double check the weight class, Paulie, but I believe he's 126. Yeah, they're both 6 footers, which is
Ray Vargas style, I guess.
yeah, wild. But we just
Espinosa style.
Yes, but listen, I like this fight.
The odds.
The odds are insane, Paulie. The odds they got Bell at minus 200. I'm sorry, minus 2,000, which is
Wow.
just insane,
Okay. But is Hunter live in any way, or is that
134. I'm sorry, lightweights, Paulie. Wow, lightweights.
Sorry, that changes the game a little bit.
It was 130. Now they're fighting 135. Yeah, so
Okay.
these guys are.
Does Hunter have any chance though? You're saying minus 2,000 is ridiculous. Is it ridiculous to the point where Hunter has a chance, or is it ridiculous to where Hunter is competitive but he doesn't win anyway?
I think it's an interesting fight. I think that they're very similar fighters. I think Bell is the better overall. I think the real difference maker in this fight is Bell is a more polished fighter. More composure, more relaxation. I think that Hunter is a little emotional, and he does tire a little bit down the stretch. I think ultimately that's going to be the difference. I see this fight going the distance, actually. I see this as a 10-round fight. I think it does go the distance. So first and foremost, that's my pick, is that the fight goes the distance.
What do you got the odds set at the distance so far? Is that
They don't have the props up yet. Yeah, so I expect those to be up tomorrow. But all they have right now is the money line, which is Bell at minus 2,000, which again, like I said, is just it should be. I mean, I could see a minus 800 situation, but minus 2,000 is insane. But it's a competitive fight. Hunter can fight. Hunter was stopped once, and that was against Polanco when he fought Polanco on ESPN. And that was more of a case of just inexperience. He just started getting touched a little bit too much, and the referee pulled the plug on the fight late. I think it was like the 8th round. He never went down. He shoved the referee. He was going crazy when they stopped the fight. He was pissed off. So he was vigorously
fighting mentality. He doesn't accept that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And obviously Polanco is one of the biggest prospects in all the boxing. At this point, Polanco's a contender more than a prospect. But I think this is a very interesting fight. It's going to be a very close fight. I lean towards Hunter, yes. But I think it's going to be competitive. I'm sorry, I lean towards Bell. But I think this is going to be a very competitive fight. I think that Hunter is very live in this fight. And I do see it going the distance. But again, I think the separation.
So live, like there's worth to give a shot to Hunter to throw something on him. Because one thing I notice about boxing too, with why certain times fights are very competitive on paper, but the odds are so wide. One thing I've realized is that it's also because the politics are kept in mind with the odds.
100%.
Sometimes the underdog, even though it's on paper very competitive, the underdog has no shot of getting a decision.
And we'll get into this
The odds wider.
we'll get into it in a little bit, but I mean, listen, they get it wrong too. Telez last week was a
Yeah,
ridiculous minus 1,000 favorite, and you saw what happened
yeah,
in that fight.
yeah, yeah.
So, so they make these disrespectful odds to the B side in boxing, and oftentimes these B sides not only do they pull off the upset, but usually they're very competitive going into the fight. So this
Mhm.
is a fight where I feel that Hunter is very competitive as well. Not a guy that should be minus 2,000.
Okay.
So I do see Bell winning strictly based on just a little more composure, a little more relaxation, more. I think he knows himself a little better as a fighter. As a matter of fact, I sent you a video. You probably checked it out early this morning. Hunter knocked this dude out in the casino. Did I send you that video?
Mhm.
So he
Okay.
got in a fight at the casino and he squared up with the guy in one shot, put him to sleep
Okay.
in the casino. So he had a knockout earlier this year. But
Okay.
Hunter is the puncher of the two. I mean, Bell's got 9 knockouts in 27 fights. So he has a couple of knockouts recently, but they're over, past their prime opponent type. So he's not a big puncher, but he can get your attention. But again, Bell is the more polished of the two fighters. I think that that's going to make the difference. I think that Hunter's going to be very competitive early, win some rounds early, have moments early. Bell might have to come from behind on the scorecards to pull this out. And in 10 rounds opposed to 12, you don't have a lot of time to do that.
In other words, you're making Hunter rather live by saying,
Yeah. I think Hunter's very live. I
and whether
again,
he can get a decision of the thing coming, of course, all right?
yeah. So I'm going to bet the distance, a little heavier on the distance, but I am going to put Bell in for the decision. But I ultimately do see this fight going the distance any which way. But it's going to be a fun fight. I'm predicting a very very good fight.
Okay. All right. All right. Is that
But
everything?
listen,
Is that everything on the schedule this week? Do we have other fights on the
or
schedule?
that's the only thing worth talking about. Honestly, there's one other fight with a couple of people I were not familiar with. In a far off land, and yeah, so that was the only one we're going to cover this week.
All
Um,
right.
we're
Yeah.
going to have a lot coming up the next couple of weeks anyway.
Yeah.
But also just with the trend, and we're going to talk about just last weekend with somebody like Telez, who we're very high on, being
Yeah.
such a heavy favorite at minus 1,000 and just getting thoroughly dismantled and beaten over the course of 12 rounds. Or yeah, that was a 12-round fight. But I mean, again, you got to be careful with these odds because they lean so heavy, especially on the money line, but they lean so heavy on the A side, and we're seeing upsets all the time. And I mean, there's money to be made in
And
these upsets on
the
the B side.
upsets are happening a lot of times with these prospects because these greedy managers and promoters no longer take the time to develop these guys to get them to that point. They throw them in way too soon.
Mm-hmm.
We end up seeing some of these guys get knocked off, right? And we're going to be discussing some of these fighters that, were on their way, seemed like blue chip prospects, but the corporate greed of the managers and promoters, they don't want to develop these guys anymore the way it was done in the old school. And you end up seeing guys get knocked off.
Paulie, I mean, we saw it in the main event and the co-main event last week. I mean, in the main event and the co-main event on the Orlando show last week, the main event was Telez, who's a minus 1,000 favorite. He gets knocked off, loses a 12-round decision, takes punishment late, by the way, and gets dropped late in the 12th round with about 20 seconds left and loses a clear-cut decision. And the co-main event was Yaquiel Rivera against Angelino Cordova. Again, Rivera had 7 fights, Paulie. So I said that fight was going to be the distance. I actually picked Rivera to win it a 12-round decision. And I'm forgetting now, actually, it might have been a 10-rounder. No, I think it was a 12-round fight. No, it was a 12-round fight. So I predicted him to win a 12-round decision. Ultimately, ended up in a draw. So he escaped the loss. And that was an ugly, sloppy fight. And that's another case of this guy just getting moved too fast. 7 pro fights.
Yeah. Seven pro fights, you go into a 12 rounder already.
And
We've seen
Cordova's got
that in the
25.
past. It's feel like it's more profound now. We've seen it in the past, guys like Davey Moore come to mind and things of that nature. But, we've seen the advent of Eastern Europeans who turn pro, even Cubans turn pro, and they're ready to move much faster than the average prospect. But really, other than that, other than those rare cases like your Lomachenkos of the world, even your Madrimovs and stuff like that, it's very, very difficult to position guy every prospect like this. And it's like almost like the standard bearer now is a prospect that you move fast, otherwise it's not a real prospect. And I feel like that takes away the opportunity for guys to develop into championship level fighters the way expert matchmakers like, guys who come to my mind like Johnny Boz back in the day, who was an expert matchmaker, rest in peace. And guys in his mold used to know how to develop guys and mold them from, good amateurs to, even average amateurs to solid pros, veterans, and then into contender status and championship status. You don't see anybody taking the time and wanting to make that investment anymore. they rush them and yeah, sometimes it works out. You got some super prospects, but even some of these super prospects, for me, Tellez was a super talent. And, to have
Yeah,
moved him that fast and not, it's kind of a shame because it was a very physically debilitating fight that, sometimes these fights change these guys. And we talk about the old school and Davey Moore. Davey Moore was never the same after the ring.
great points. Because what I was going to say is now I'll even refer to a couple of guys that Trinidad beat. David Reed, they
Hmm.
moved him fast into the Trinidad fight.
Yeah.
Now, yeah, I know he had the eye problem, and but
Hmm.
still, he main events moved him into that fight very fast. And a lot of people said that Vargas took that fight with
Trinidad.
Trinidad as well too fast.
Yeah.
Now, with David Reed, I think it kind of ruined him. I think he was never the same after that fight with
Yeah.
a punishing 12 round fight with Trinidad. I think did he go to 12 rounds or was he knocked out late?
I'm not sure, but it might have either. I remember him going down. I'm not sure if he went
He
to
went down a couple of
the.
times. And Vargas, of course, got stopped in the 12th round. He took a lot of punishment throughout the course of the fight. So it's not just that they're losing. Because if you notice, Paulie, the trend is none of these guys are not actually getting stopped. They're taking punishment over the course of 12 rounds.
Yeah.
Telez took an
Because
ass.
they have that youthful energy where they want to win. They have
Yeah,
that super desire to succeed. They had, and achieve their goals. You're more ferocious when you're younger, but of course, being put in a ferocious fight like that, you're going to wind up taking punishment if you're not ready for it. And then you bring that ferocity, and that's what you've seen. And then I feel like we saw that with Telez.
we saw with the French Olympian Omaha a couple of weeks ago when he fought
Yeah,
Francisco Francesca.
Fonseca. Yeah, Fonseca.
Fonseca. Fonseca
Omaha had what? Omaha. He had about six fights, six
six
and oh.
fights.
Yeah,
Fonseca has
Fonseca.
42.
Fonseca really not the greatest fighter in the world, but he'd been in solid competition like Tank Davis, like Ryan Garcia. Pretty good fringe contender.
Yeah,
Guy's only got six fights. The other prospect only had six fights. For putting him in 10, 12 rounders. It's again not
and
every blue chip prospect is a former Soviet standout. But
yeah.
doesn't mean that you have to treat them like that just because they were good amateurs. It's kind of a shame.
Yeah, no, it is. You're seeing it. The common trend in boxing, and it's happened a lot this year. Guys with 12 or less fights. In last week's case, Tellez had what, 10 fights, and
Tellez, yeah,
Tellez
Tellez,
had 10 fights. And Rivera, who was the co-main event. I mean, you're talking about a main event and a co-main event that both came up short.
yeah.
One was lucky to escape with a draw,
Mhm.
and his stock went down in an awful fight, full of just mauling and rough out tactics and points taken and just a foul fest. And Tellez took an ass kicking. I mean, Tellez took serious punishment rounds 8 through 12, serious punishment. So there's your main event, your co-main event that are just in there with guys that are too experienced for that. That's really the name of the game, is the experience factor. So when you have a guy with 6, 7, 10 fights in, no matter how much amateur pedigree he has, and you have him in there, it's not just Poet that they're fighting guys with 30 and 40 fights. They're fighting world class guys that are still in their prime. It's one thing to put your guy in with a guy that has 30 or 35 fights. That might be faded, that's no longer a top contender. Yeah, okay. But not when a guy is, for instance, Morel versus Benavidez.
Mhm.
Benavidez had 28 fights. I don't care how good Morel is. Morel had 11 fights. Benavidez had so many more rounds in the
And
bank.
also, Benavidez is not just a world championship level fighter. He is one of the, fringe pound for pound level guy. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? He gets
and it
these.
make Paulie. There's a vast difference between having 10 pro fights and having. Well, I feel like that. If you want to rush a guy, I think rush the guy, but he needs 15 pro fights. I
Mhm.
mean, again, you have your exceptions, Lomachenko, and everyone wants to have a Lomachenko.
Lomachenko and Lomachenko and Rigondo were essentially maybe the best amateurs in history. But
Yeah,
yeah, I'll tell you what, I'll take you back to, an era where prospects were moved at a normal rate, and there was an amateur like these guys. It was Mark Breland, who was 110-1 in the amateurs.
yeah,
They didn't put him in a championship fight after seven fights. And
no,
honestly, Breland still didn't really end up accomplishing what was expected of him, but he won two world championships. But I don't know how many pro fights Breland had when he fought for the title, but
it
they
was still in
moved
the
him
teens.
at a normal
He's
rate,
Breland.
essentially. Like, you had, I remember, when I think about it, Whitaker was 16-0 when they put him with Jose Luis Ramirez, and that was considered like, whoa, they moved him fast.
Yeah,
And I remember Whitaker was special, but you still had 16 fights before you moved him in for a championship. This guy's less than 10 fights. You know what it is, too? Again, it's that greed, too. Nobody wants to spend any money anymore. These cheap bastards don't want to spend any money. They just want to make money. They want to cash in on these fighters.
yeah,
And they don't want to take the time to develop them to their full potential before getting them to championship fights where they can not only win but then last at that level. Because once you get to the championship level, okay, if you win, you
yeah.
don't get to go back down a level of opposition. Now you got to stay at that level of opposition. So, is your guy ready for that?
The only guy that comes to mind right now that has less than 10 fights that is a dominant force that I don't see losing is Andy Cruz. And Andy Cruz had,
Yeah, yeah, you have certain special guys, and I know you have more of them in this generation because more Cubans and more Eastern Europeans are turning pro, and those guys are have their amateur systems in that fashion where there's super amount of competitive fights and a super amount of fights in general. But for the most part, a standout Western amateur, top amateur, you still need those quote unquote 15 fights.
yeah,
Still need even for a standout top amateur in the West for the most part. You know,
yeah,
there are your rare exceptions, the Lomachenkos, your Rigondos, your Andy Cruzes. You know, even
yeah.
Morel's to a degree, but that Morel, they not only they moved them super fast. Like Canelo ducked the guy, and then you put him in with Benavidez, who nobody wants to fight, and he
And then after that, he fought Kenny.
Kenatiev, who is another guy
Kaya.
who was one of that same Russian rugged mold. You
And
know,
they handed him the decision. Well, he lost the fight. He
yeah.
lost the fight. I worked out for me because I had him in all my parlays that he was closing out, and thank God he won because I would have lost a couple $100. But I watched the fight. I didn't watch it live actually. I watched it after the fact, and I'm like, Jesus. Yeah, they gave him a gift, but
Yeah.
they didn't just give him a gift, Paul. He took punishment in that fight. Punishment. So the one common denominator, all the guys that I mentioned, the only one that got stopped actually, guy James Dickens, who was a big puncher from the UK. He's 40-0 with 30 some odd knockouts. No, I'm sorry, 40. He's a UK fighter. He
Uh-huh.
beat Albert Bedrzejov, who has 12 pro fights. That
That's
was a couple of weeks ago.
yeah.
Maybe. All right, now Dickens is something in the ballpark of like 33-5, I want to say, or 33-6, but he's a very good puncher, and he
Uh-huh.
smoked this guy in 4 rounds. The one
Yeah.
common denominator
Well,
is
how many fights did the other guy have?
12 fights.
12 fights. They were moving that guy fast too, because that guy had actually, from having inside info with Pro Box, that guy had been offered a Lamont Roach fight too before
Okay,
the Tank Davis fight. So
and Roach would have beat him.
they were trying to move that guy fast
He
overall.
got stopped. He got stopped in 4 rounds. He got dropped multiple times. He wasn't even competitive.
Yeah.
The only common denominator I can say, and this is since this is a boxing gambling show, that this is why you want to make smart moves. Every one of these fights was a decision, Paulie. So they're all good enough. They're going to go the distance, even in the instances where these
But
guys.
that guy got stopped.
Yes, the only one. Yeah, he got stopped in the 4th round. But Morel in both cases, the one where he got the gift, and of
Yeah.
course the loss to
Pelez,
Benavidez.
all this other stuff.
Pelez was a decision. Yafai was a decision. These are all decision fights.
Yeah.
But
That's why the fight to go to distance is a little bit of a safer thing, and just in case,
yeah,
cover
if
hedge
an
yourself.
upset happens, even Yafai took punishment and got dropped late as well. So it's again, Paul, it's not just that they're losing; they're getting damaged in there because they're
Yeah.
moving them too fast. I'll tell you this right now: I don't think Morel's going to be the same fighter here on
Yeah.
out. He's had 2 back-to-back taxing fights, and
Yeah.
the last one against the Russian was far worse than the one against
Benavidez.
Benavidez. Benavidez, he was competitive in a loss. Yeah, the last fight, I thought he clearly lost. They handed him the decision, and he took a lot of punishment along the way. He got dropped in that one, and they're just moving these guys way too fast because they don't want to make the investment. They want to fast track these guys
Yeah.
into
The
world
money
title
fight,
status, and then
where you go from investing to just collecting.
exactly, dude. The way you do it, and the way you do it, the template has always been the same. The blueprint has always been the same. A perfect example is a guy like William Zepeda. Zepeda just had 34 fights before he fought for a world title. That's the way it was always done.
That's always, yeah.
25 fights, 28 fights, 30 fights. And you had people complaining that Golden Boy was when's he going to step up already? Well, listen, he saw it all in 34 fights, and we discussed it on the show before he fought Stevenson. He fought like 4 or 5 southpaws in a row. He was as prepared for Shakur Stevenson as one can be, and he still was very competitive in that fight. He had his moments. He won some rounds. He came up short. But that's the way you build a fighter. He had 34 fights under his belt. He fought former world champions like Joe Diaz, like Tevin Farmer, and he had seen and done everything as a prospect that contended before he finally stepped up to fight Shakur. That's how you move a fighter. You don't move a fighter with 5, 6 fights, 8 fights, and put him in there with a guy like Francisco Rodriguez that has 47 fights and who's never been stopped, and you're going to have to kick his ass for 12 rounds because you're not going to get rid of him.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the thing though. This way you can actually keep up appearances. You even if you come up short, you can make somewhat of a good showing
Yeah.
against an elite fighter as opposed to just being thrown in. Like with Telez's point, Telez lost to a guy nobody knows, but
Mm-hmm.
the guy's difficult as hell, rugged guy, and Telez was a streaking prospect. Telez was may still be, who knows, but an excellent prospect, one of the better prospects I've seen in the sport. And I don't know where they found this guy, but this machine that he fought. But so it's not even you're not even keeping up appearances now because not only you got him beat by a guy nobody really knows. At least with Zepeda, you keep up appearances, you move him, you prepare him, and then you get him with Shakur Stevenson, who everybody knows is, you know, the elite of the elite right now, and he put up a decent performance, definitely couldn't be mistaken for a win or anything, but at least kept up appearances.
But also, Paulie, like I said, these guys are taking punishment, and each training camp is taxing, each fight is taxing. But when you're taking punishment over the course of 12 rounds, whether it's Tellez, whether it's Morrell, whether it's Omaha, all these guys are getting beaten up over the course of that, especially the second half of the fight.
Mhm.
So that's also the common trend. They're front running, yeah, they're winning the first half of the fight because they're they're in sixth gear. They're already in sixth gear. And the second half of the fight, they're slowing down, they're getting broken down. The way Tellez, there was nothing on Tellez's shots by
And
the eighth
that's the
round.
difference by an amateur too. An amateur doesn't have to fight those long rounds, those long fights against these kind of guys who are rugged late in fights. That's where the experience starts to play a factor.
Listen, boxing's been around for well over 100 years. Matchmaking has always kind of been done the same way, Paulie. You just build the guy the right way,
Mhm.
4 rounder, 6, 8, 10, a 12 rounder or two, and then you put him in for a world title or you put him in a dangerous fight. And he has all those rounds under his belt. He has all that experience.
Wasn't there a guy back in the 50s who fought Floyd Patterson right out of the
In his
amateur?
pro debut, in his pro
Right?
debut,
He was
and
an
he
Olympic
dropped
gold medalist.
and he dropped Patterson. He actually dropped Patterson. Then he
Hey,
got
he was quality, but again, the cream rises to the top overall.
yeah, he
And
was an Olympian, and they moved him quick. And
yeah,
all
he was
these
from
guys,
Europe or
Paulie,
something, somewhere in Europe.
yeah, he was a
Okay.
European Olympian. And every guy that we mentioned today, every single guy that has been upset lately, and there's been 5 or 6 of them with 12 or less fights, these guys are all Olympians. So you're talking about the cream of the crop, and you're
Yeah,
getting them knocked off too early, and maybe they don't ever fully develop now. They're not all going to fully develop, that's for
yeah.
sure.
And
So
if this starts to become the standard, I've mentioned this before, but if this starts to become the standard, is the no patience approach to just going from top amateur right into the top pros. Is that good for boxing? Is that bad for boxing? I wonder what people think because in other sports, if you're a blue chip NCAA prospect, for example, in American sports, you're going right to the elite right away in the pros, and you're going to be a starter on your pro team, and you're going right into the elite right away. If you're not a blue chip prospect, you'll maybe ride the bench, you'll become a reserve, and maybe you'll have to work your way into a better system. So people, it's what people are used to in other sports, but in boxing, it's not been the mechanism that the go-to mechanism until now. So I don't know from a fan's perspective if people think this is more entertaining or not, but I do think some guys they would have had a better chance to be developed and develop into champions. We've seen that in the old school. The old school we've seen guys be developed into some very solid fighters. Dude, maybe the greatest Mexican fighter of all time. You can say that. Julio Cesar Chavez fought a slew of cab drivers. You know what I mean?
yeah, it's
And
funny because
and
with Mexican fighters, they do it the opposite. They get a
yeah,
wealth of experience. Canelo
yeah,
Alvarez, there's why Canelo has over 70 pro fights. Mexican
yeah,
fighters, they move them slow, but they keep them very active and
yeah.
busy.
Yeah, and then they develop everything through those fights, and then they're prepared for anything when they get to world class level.
But here's one thing you're missing also, but it's a sport and a business, right? You're not building your fan base the right way. How does
Mhm.
Canelo Alvarez have such a big fan base? Because he got so on so many big platforms and it was seen so often, fighting on these Mayweather undercards, fighting on pay-per-view undercards, then
Mhm.
eventually fighting on HBO himself, and then eventually headlining his own pay-per-views. So rinse and repeat. I mean, you keep bringing a guy back, you're not going to build a fan base after 5, 6 fights.
Yeah,
William Zepeda probably has a bigger fan base or close to a big fan base as Shakur Stevenson because he's a Mexican fighter. He's fought in California throughout his career, and they've seen him fight 34 times before he gets in there with Shakur. So even the business model, I'm also thinking is a little bit broken because you want to fast track these guys to a world title and then turn them into a superstar, but you can't build a fan base over 6, 8, 10, 12 fights. But that stretches out. It takes a while to build a superstar. You have to have X amount of fights to build a superstar. So even from a fan base perspective, last week they're fighting in a small room in Orlando. It's not like a lot of people turned out to see Tellez
yeah,
fight. It's not like he's got 10,000 people in the stands.
yeah. The Caribe, I've worked those fights. Pretty nice place, but
Yeah,
still
yeah.
not a huge arena, of course.
Yeah, so I mean, hopefully the matchmakers and the promoters, start seeing what we're seeing because it's become
Again, it's
commonplace.
also become a more greedy world. Your dollar doesn't go as far anymore, so people want to start cashing in right away because losing money. Everything loses money so much faster nowadays than in the old days, and so it's starting to like trickle into the business of boxing as well. It's kind of sad to see in some ways.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah, yeah.
see, and it's going to prevent certain type of guys from really achieving a level that maybe in other generations they would have achieved.
Yeah, yeah, but again, even tomorrow's, I'm sorry, this weekend's fight, the one fight, a guy like Bell, I do read comments of people complaining that, hey, listen, this guy's 27, or oh yeah, when's he going to step up? Guess what? When he's ready, when he does step up, this is going to be his 28th professional fight. So yeah, I agree that he's ready to step up, and this is a good test with Hunter, a guy that he's supposed to beat. But should he beat Hunter, and I'm expecting it to be a good competitive fight, he beats Hunter. Now you say to yourself, this guy's ready for a title eliminator, or he's ready for a world title shot if possible, because they're pushing him the IBF route, and the IBF usually enforces their mandatories. So they're trying to get him to the number one spot with the IBF, and then he'll end up fighting for a title. But you know what? I like that way of climbing the ladder a lot better than the other way, which is 5, 6, 7 fights to throw a guy in there like Rivera last week, and he gets mauled and he fights Cordova to a 12-round draw, and now his stock goes down. Opposed to a guy like Albert Bell, who maybe like Shakur Stevenson, maybe he doesn't ever become a world champion, but he is going to be fully developed when and if he does get that shot.
Yeah, it's a good point too. Because you're again, we talked about the Mexican route. That's what they do. I mean, you look at Chavez and Canelo; they're excellent examples. But even certain other guys, yeah, they do turn pro very, very young, so you do have to kind of be patient with them. I remember thinking of like somebody like Manuel Medina turned pro at 14 years old. Started out like 2-2, but then
Yeah.
then he wound up at like 70 wins and like 6 losses or something. Something crazy, won world championship. So yeah, that is the other under the spectrum. But you also notice a lot of Mexican fighters have a lot of success with that, a lot of success. So
Yeah.
there is a balance. Listen, I'm not going to tell you it's definitely a surefire way to where that it works and it doesn't work. Every fighter is a little bit different. Every fighter achieves a little bit differently and matures a little bit differently. And even coming out of the amateurs, every top amateur has an opportunity to go to a world class level in the pro game if moved correctly. But what's moved correctly for one top amateur may not be the same movement for another top amateur. So it's up to a really shrewd matchmaker and promoter and manager to figure it out. And I just don't know that they are that shrewd anymore as the old school guys used to be. I think they're more greedy than anything else. Again, I bring up a guy like Johnny Boz, I dealt with him myself. So shrewd, such a class matchmaker, and knew exactly how to develop certain kind of guys, man.
And Paulie, it's not to cut you off, but that's why I think right back to Top Rank, best matchmakers in the sport, right?
Yeah.
Best promoters.
They have those old school guys like Goodman and Trampler who come from that old school mentality.
But who else did they have, Paulie?
Oh.
They had Rigondeaux and they had Lomachenko. They knew how to move those two guys that we've
They
spoke about.
made this, and they knew how to move those guys fast. See, those guys move, but they knew
who else they have? They have Cruz. They have Andy Cruz.
No, they don't have Cruz. There's
Are you sure?
Yeah, Eddie Hearn is Cruz.
Oh, okay, you're right. Okay, 2 out of 3.
Yeah.
But I mean, listen, they set the standard. Rigondeaux followed by Lomachenko set the standard for what we're seeing.
Top Rank doesn't like to promote Cubans because they don't. A lot of Cuban fighters, as good as they are, they don't sell a lot of tickets.
No,
so.
they don't sell. Yeah. Rigondeaux, that was Rigondeaux didn't move any tickets.
Yeah.
Lomachenko turned to a star.
Yeah.
But yeah, listen. I mean, this has been in place. This is how matchmaking has always been done. It's just the way it is. You can't, if it's not broke, don't fix it. This is the way it's always been. And now you're seeing, this particular style of matchmaking and aggressive.
But it takes a lot of homework, and people don't want to do that homework anymore. Like the new school guys aren't really doing that kind of homework as before. So we'll see. I mean, there are. Not saying every matchmaker in the business is bad now. There are solid guys still. We see some of the old school guys, and even some of these new school guys. I like guys like Robert Diaz and even Chris Glover, bro. I like he does well. But yeah, I mean, it's certainly an acquired skill. And
I'm going to tell you this, just from a betting perspective. Next time I see one of these prospects or / contenders that's 8-0 and they're putting him in there with a guy that has 30+ pro fights, Paulie, I'm going to bet the distance every single time because the upset's always going to be in the cards, okay? But these fights, like I said, they're all going to distance. That's the wild thing.
And these veterans know how to go to distance, even if they do lose to the prospect. And
we know
carry the prospect deep.
And we know somebody that actually bet against Tellez last week, and he made a nice hit, right?
Yeah,
now, we both thought we thought.
I thought he was out of his mind.
You're making a donation, okay? But I also said on the show I thought that fight had a very good chance to go the distance. All right? Now that's an example of it, and I'll be honest, I did bet Tellez for the money line, and for the decision. Now
on the parlays, he didn't get
knocked a lot of my parlays. He hurt a lot of us. He hurt a lot of gamblers.
When you take a favorite like that, you don't personally just do it straight up on the money line. You do it on the parlay where you don't get hammered in case you lose.
Yeah, and I also I do it with a prop bet. So I had him by decision. At basically even odds, or maybe it might even have been plus 110, I believe. But I got nailed on that one. Now, if I wasn't greedy in that particular scenario, if I just bet the distance, I win. Same thing
Mhm.
with Rivera. If I just bet the distance, it ended up with a draw, so it was a wash. But
Mhm.
if I just bet the distance, I win again. So that's why I talk about just it's not always just about getting
Rivera, no,
big.
Rivera was a guy that beat Colin. Jean Paul Rivera was the one that beat
No, Yakio Rivera.
Yaki
Yakio Rivera.
Rivera.
7-0 with 3 knockouts.
Yeah,
He was
yeah,
in a draw with Angel Cordova.
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Now again, I had him. I had Rivera for the decision, the 12-round decision win.
Uh,
My bets all got voided because it ended in a draw. But if I just bet the distance and left it alone, I would
yeah,
have won my bets. So
yeah.
that's why I preach about just sometimes just bet the
Yeah.
distance. Just
You
bet the
remember a few
distance.
weeks ago when I was looking to put on Nick Ball in, you were like, bro, Goodman's might be dangerous. Maybe
Yeah,
do it to go to distance. Obviously Ball ended up winning, but sometimes it's like, just in case, you might
yeah,
want to play it safe and just put it to go to distance. The fight did go to distance. Obviously Ball did win, but going to distance still is a cover.
100%. That's why a lot of times I'll give two bets when I see a fight where a guy that B side like in that particular fight with Paul last week, where I think that B side is very live. I'm going to put more money on that fight going the distance. But if I'm that certain it's going to go the distance, because I got to invest a lot less money when Ball is a plus 220 to win a decision, right? So I don't
Yeah.
got to take a big risk there. So I'll put more money on the fight going the distance. Should he get upset? But
Mhm.
if he pulls off the win, then I'm going to win both ways. But I'm going to win really good odds, and then I'm going to have a good investment because I bet a lot of money on the fight going the distance, which I felt like it was going to anyway. So yeah, I mean that's why I say it's covering two bases instead of one because you're not going to get as good of odds. But all I need is the fight to go the distance. The second that bell rings and the
Yeah,
fight is
instead of
over,
betting Ball by decision, you just bet go to distance,
yeah.
just in case.
So if in every one of these upsets that we've seen recently, with all these guys less than 12 fights getting beat, and I had Benavidez beating Morrell, but I didn't have him stopping him. So I had Benavidez on the decision, but I also bet even more money on that fight just going the distance because I didn't see a knockout in that fight.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
felt both guys aren't punching the same at 175 that they were punching at 168.
Mhm.
So I've been betting some of these fights to go the distance, but now, I mean, if had I bet all these fights to go the distance, yeah, there are upsets, but I'm still good. It doesn't make a difference.
Yeah, you would have covered yourself with Tellez, of course.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Tellez one hurt a lot of us, though. I mean, nobody saw this one coming.
Well, except one guy we know.
One
Okay.
lucky
One
guy
degenerate guy
that
got
knows
it.
nothing about boxing, by the
Yeah.
way.
You just caught it. He found it on a tip.
Yeah,
Say that. All right, man. I think that's everything for this week, right, Tommy?
yeah. That's it. Next week we'll
All
be
right,
back
man.
with three cards to cover, and then
Yeah.
the following week is the big stuff. Is
Is it
Alvarez
good stuff?
Crawford.
So, guys, can continue. We appreciate all your views and keep, like, subscribe. Let us know what you think in the comments and your thoughts on some of these prospects being moved too fast these days. And remember, everything we describe and talk about here is not gambling or betting advice. It's strictly for entertainment purposes. But we hope you have enjoyed the show. And we'll be back next week. This is Tommy and Paulie's Big Fight Forecast.